and welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of KevinMD. Today on the show, we have Archana Shrestha. She is an emergency physician and physician life coach. She is co-founder of Women in White Coats, and she wrote the KevinMD article, What Kamala Harris Means for Women Doctors. Archana, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Kevin, for having me. I'm really excited to be here and sharing with your audience.
So we'll get into your article in a little bit, but first off, if you could share your story and your journey today, that'd be great.
Yeah, Kevin. So I'm happy to share, Women in White Coats, we really started really with an idea that began after we published our book, our best-selling book, The Chronicles of Women in White Coats, back in 2018. And what that book was the real life stories of women doctors, 20 women doctors. We shared the struggles that we went through being women in a heavily male-dominated field of medicine that it is still today. And we share the ups and downs, the different things we went through, the obstacles, the people who didn't believe that we had what it took to become doctors, what it was like to be a mom in medicine. I wrote about what it was like to be pregnant working in the ER. And we also talked about things like sexual harassment and burnout and physician suicide in that book. We really touched on a lot of real topics that were happening. And when we were at our book launch, what we realized is this was more than just a moment in time in writing this book, but that it was really the beginning of a movement of women doctors coming together to empower one another and to share their stories that needed to be shared. And that people out there, especially the young women out there considering a career in medicine, needed to know like what the struggles were, what the real deal was, and not just like the Grey's Anatomy version of it. So we wanted to share that real deal. And what also happened, Kevin, was that so many other women doctors started to come out and say, I want to share my story too. I've gone through some different things through my career, some ups and downs, some struggles. I want to share those stories too. And so we created the blog, and on there, we've just shared so many different perspectives on so many different things that women are going through. And trying to juggle career and life, the second shift that happens when we come home and have all the family responsibilities, dealing with imposter syndrome, gender pay inequity, all of the things that are really going on. And so, when we were training, we realized this old boys club of medicine is really alive and well. And what we needed to do with Women in White Coats was really create a sisterhood within medicine and really be there for one another, uplift and empower one another. And so that's exactly what we did. And through Women in White Coats, we've been really able to build a really amazing community of women that get together and support and uplift one another. And we do that through our CME courses, through our events, and now coaching. And it's just been incredibly rewarding to be in this space right now.
Wonderful. And especially during the pandemic over the last few months, what are you seeing are some of the major themes that women physicians are facing?
I'm sure you've seen some of the statistics on the number of women who are leaving the workforce right now. And that is actually happening too for women doctors, having to figure out ways to make this work, right? So many of us are mothers as well, and we have kids in school and trying to figure out childcare where maybe we were able to have a lot more help before between daycare or nannies and other things like that. And school, of course, kids going to school and that being a way to make being a career woman work. When your kids are at school, if you're working, then that kind of allows things to work and flow better. But right now, women doctors are really struggling with trying to find that balance. Not only are they worried for their own safety of getting COVID, for example, and bringing that home to their family, but also trying to juggle when they are home, like, maybe they are working remotely or doing some telemedicine and trying to see patients and be professional online while also having to meet the needs of your children who are doing remote learning. I've also been seeing a lot of women doctors wanting to pivot, right now in their career and do something a little bit different, something that can allow them a little bit more flexibility in their schedule and a little bit more freedom. So people switching to non-clinical careers, switching to telemedicine, some people leaving medicine altogether and maybe starting online businesses as well. So there's definitely been a lot of change this year for women and a lot of different things that they're having to juggle right now. So it was already hard before the pandemic, but I feel like it's even harder now.
Yeah, and on my podcast, I talk to a lot of physicians, and this is both women and men as well. Like they're pivoting, they're taking less time in the clinic, starting businesses, coaching, and just taking a step out of clinical medicine. Now, what are some other ways that women physicians can perhaps pivot out of medicine if the clinical situation isn't ideal for them?
Yeah, there's so many different ways, and I'm actually really passionate about that right now. At Women in White Coats, we had a summit, entire summit called Women Docs Thinking Outside the Box, and we shared a whole bunch of different ways that women doctors are thinking outside the box, doing maybe some non-clinical work or practicing clinically in different ways. Things like direct primary care, telemedicine, locums. There's different ways that you can try to take back control a little bit more
Yeah.
of your schedule, and also maybe even the financial side of things. And with direct primary care, a lot of people are not taking insurance. They're having a
Hmm.
more direct to consumer, a direct to patient financial arrangement. But aside from that, there's a lot of different non-clinical careers that we talked about in the summit. Things from utilization review to doing R&D or working for pharma. There's so many different
Hmm.
options there. There's a lot of people getting certified as coaches too right now. And one of the cool things that we are doing at Women in White Coats is because we saw the need in our community of so many women wanting to think outside the box and so many women wanting to actually start their own businesses,
Hmm.
online businesses, because as I'm sure you've seen, Kevin, and you're seeing, so, I'm hearing so many success stories of people who've had amazing growth with their online business this year. And that's sort of been the silver lining, I think, of this pandemic, is that online businesses have grown tremendously. And so we're hearing from women doctors where they've seen huge success online. And we too have grown with Women in White Coats in this year. We weren't sure how things would but we actually grew tremendously and doubled our revenue in 2020. And so I'm really passionate about helping other women doctors who want to make that transition to start creating some other source of revenue besides their clinical income. Because as we've all seen, I think this pandemic has really shown us that medicine isn't quite as stable as we thought it was. We were kind of all sold on that idea that it was. And I used to, in fact, tell people, oh yeah, medicine is recession proof. People will always need doctors.
Hmm.
And while that's true, they do need doctors. This pandemic, left, I think the statistic I saw was 1 in 4 of us either furloughed or with pay cuts. And we're sitting on the sidelines of a pandemic happening, a global pandemic. And you've got these
Sure.
doctors who are highly trained, not being able to find work. So I'm really passionate about if there's women doctors out there who have an idea, something else that they have wanted to do. And so many of us are multi-passionate, and I'm definitely one of those people who has been multi-passionate, but I decided to taking an idea and turning it into a business is such a great idea right now. And that's one of the things that I'm coaching women on. And we just actually launched our Women in White Coats Business Academy to help give women doctors all that information and know-how that they need. Because so much of the time we think we can't do it
Hmm.
because we don't have the MBA or we don't have the experience, but you can totally do it. And that's why we created the Business Academy, to help women doctors create that other source of income and turn their passion into a profit, even during this pandemic.
All right, let's transition into the KevinMD article that you wrote, What Kamala Harris Means for Women Doctors. Now, for those who haven't read the article, can you just walk my audience through it and maybe share the story of why you decided to write it?
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. So when Joe Biden won the election and Kamala Harris became the first ever woman elected, VP elect, so many women on social media were really excited,
Hmm.
and they were talking about how the glass ceiling had been shattered. And I completely was excited as well that finally we were going to have a woman in the vice presidential office of the United States of America. And that too, for it to be a woman of color, of a multi ethnic background, achieving such heights just felt really, really amazing. And as I was kind of reading some of the stories about her, I came across this one quote she often says about her mother, which is that her mother said, Kamala, you may be the first to do many things, but make sure you're not the last.
Hmm.
And that really resonated with me because so often we think, this whole concept of unicorns at the top, which is that it's easy to think that just because we have a few women in high level positions that women have arrived, right? Just because there's a
Hmm.
few women as CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, or a few women who are CMOs, right? Chief medical officers out there, or that we have the president of the AMA who is a woman, or a few women in male dominated specialties such as neurosurgery or orthopedics. that we have arrived at gender equality. And yes, that's a step forward. And yes, that is the beginning, but it can't be the end of where we need to go. So much more needs to be done. And the truth is, within medicine, this is definitely the case. We do see some of those unicorns who have broken that glass ceiling, but that is not what the rest of us are feeling. The rest of us women doctors are feeling and going through. And so, just to kind of share in the article, I share some statistics, and I can share that with the audience, which is that there's still a significant pay gap in medicine, and women doctors earn up to 33% less than their male counterparts for the same work. And even though women are 36% of practicing physicians out there, they only make up 15% of department chairs. And there was also a study published that showed that 78% of women doctors who are mothers felt discrimination in the workplace. And then in 2020, Medscape, before the pandemic, released statistics about burnout rates, and 48% of women doctors said they felt burnt out. And that was before the pandemic. So I can only imagine how much higher it is right now.
Sure.
And so I think that we just need to keep pushing forward for more equality in medicine. And the thing is, though, that we can't do this alone. We women can't do this alone, and we really need our male allies. And so, we need there's the hashtag he for she. And I really, really love that hashtag because I've actually had a lot of men in my life who've supported me, starting with my father and now my husband, who's really supported me in my career. And even at work, I've had men support me as well. My physician colleagues, especially when I was pregnant or had family issues come up, they were there to support me. And I think that we just need more of that. Women really need more of that. And especially men who are in positions of power, reaching out to women who are interested in taking on leadership roles, who have the qualifications, and really trying to bring them up, because I really believe that women can make amazing leaders as well. And so just like Joe Biden did in selecting Kamala Harris as his running mate, we really need men to be our allies. And so I think if we have that, we can really push forward. And that's what my article was about.
What's the role of communities? I have a community on KevinMD. Of course, you have a very strong community as well. And, just give us some examples of how the power of sharing their story, how can that make a difference?
Yeah, it's so incredibly powerful. I think, sharing stories is vulnerable, right? And there's so much power in just opening up and sharing those vulnerable things. And on our blog, in our books, people have shared a lot of vulnerable things from like miscarriages to sexual harassment, to imposter syndrome, to failing, right? Failing certain tests in med school or having to take the boards again. Those things are really difficult to talk about. But the thing is, every time someone shares about something vulnerable like that, they realize that there's so many other people who've gone through the same thing and that they're not alone. And that's like the big thing that we love with what we're doing at Women in White Coats. And my big kind of take home message is that I don't want women to feel alone in this. It is a struggle. It is a difficult field. Getting, for all of us, men and women alike, getting through med school, getting through residency, the training is difficult. And even once you're out there as an attending, it isn't like life is easy all of a sudden, especially right now in this pandemic. It is a really difficult profession that takes a lot of sacrifice. But if you're also sitting there feeling alone in the struggle, like you're the only one there who's the only one going through this alone, then that makes it even more difficult. And when we have our events and our, whether they're virtual or in-person events, the biggest thing that women say when they're a part of our events is like, wow, like I don't feel alone anymore. I was feeling so alone. I was feeling like I was the only one feeling like an imposter, the only one feeling burnt out or wanting to pivot. But you know what? So many other people are going through that too. And that's what we want. They kind of like breathe this sigh of relief and feel like these are my people. This is my tribe. And now I feel like there's other people there who get me. And just that in and of itself, knowing that you're not alone is so huge.
We're talking to Archana Shrestha. She is an emergency physician and a life coach. She is the founder of Women in White Coats, and she wrote the KevinMD article, What Kamala Harris Means for Women Doctors. Archana, if there's something that you know now that you wish you knew back before you started, any piece of advice that you could share to those female medical students, the women in residency, the young physicians? What kind of advice can you give them as they navigate the medical world as it is today?
Yeah, for me, I guess what I wished I knew back then was that it's okay to be multi-passionate, to
Hmm.
have interests outside of medicine. Because the thing is, like, medicine can be so all-consuming, right?
Yeah.
Like I do remember this entire decade of my life that I dedicated to the study of medicine, to taking care of patients, to just really burying my head in the books and studying for exams and learning everything I could because I took it really seriously. I wanted to be the best doctor I could be. And it's just like I always describe med school as like sort of like drinking from a fire hydrant.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's so much information coming at you. And it does require that for a period of time, I think. And so many of us already are very talented people before we even get into med school, where many people have, like, you know, whether they're artists or singers or musicians or writers or whatever else it was, like so many of us were really well-rounded people, but we kind of throw all that out the window. We put that on the back burner for some time, and it's okay to do that. But what I love is to tell people to come back to those things when the time is right. Make sure you come back to it, or maybe even just keep it going a little bit in the background, and keep those things there. And it's okay that to maybe come back to them at another time and to bring that passion back, to reconnect with certain things. For me, that was reconnecting with writing. And
Hmm.
for me also, this entrepreneurial spirit grew in me when I became a mom. I guess it was my form of nesting. I started having all these ideas for businesses.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I think what I like to share with people is to just give them permission
Sure.
to have those passions, to pursue them, and not feel like your whole life has to be medicine only, that you can't do other things, because you have so much to offer beyond the exam room, beyond the hospital, to the world. And so just go out there, share that with people, and don't be afraid to do that.
And my final question, what's your take-home message that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
Yeah, I guess my take home message, especially right now, is as people are pivoting, and I think there's so much guilt around that, around pivoting and like leaving medicine, as if the only way to do it was, and if the only way to be considered successful and a career in medicine is to, you know, last until you're 65 and
Hmm.
practicing full time, you know, that there's only one way to do it. So my, I guess, big takeaway is like, it's your degree. Do
Hmm.
whatever you want with it, and do so unapologetically. You do not owe anybody an explanation. Whether you are working full time, part time, switching to locums, doing telemedicine, doing something non clinical, starting some other business, it's your degree and you can do with it what you want. And there's so many ways to help people, like I said, beyond the exam room, beyond the hospital, beyond the office. You can help people in so many different ways. And I encourage you just to own it, you know, own it and do so unapologetically.
Archana, thank you for sharing your time and insight. And thanks again for being on the show.
It's been awesome, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me on.